Welcome to the Sample Chapter Podcast, the show where authors read a sample chapter from one of their books. Here's your host, Jason A. Meiske.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to episode 83 of the Sample Chapter Podcast with dark fantasist Kathrin Hutson. It's going to be a great episode. You don't want to miss out on that. But before we get over to that, I want to give a very special greeting to those of you out there around the world, especially in Spain. I want to say hola. And those of you in the Dominican Republic, saludo. And gracias to both of you for the amazing support with all the downloads I've been seeing coming from both countries. And I'm just very humbled that the show is now downloaded in over 20 countries. And it really humbles me to see that so many people are finding this as a resource to find a new author, some great books. I'm blown away. And thank you, everybody around the world. But, today I just want to pick those two countries out because those in particular, I've been seeing quite the numbers in Spain. And those of you in the Dominican Republic who have been downloading, thank you for getting me on the top 100 list in iTunes there. So that's been really special. That really surprised me and made my day when I found out about that. So yeah, but thank you everybody around the world. I'm so happy that you are finding worth out of this show. I know there's a lot of great authors that have been on here, and there's even more to come. And yeah. Thank you for believing in me the way I believe in these authors. So I look forward to bringing you more. So hey, don't forget to follow the show on Facebook and Twitter. Click that subscribe button on whatever platform it is that you're using to listen to the show. iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, even YouTube now. And if you would please take a second and give me a rating. Just whatever you feel the show is worth to you. However many stars. If you want to write a review, that's great, but it's not necessary. But yeah, doing that rating though does help increase visibility, so that more wonderful people like yourself can find some of their brand new favorite books because of this show, and I really appreciate it. There's been a great response to my announcement last week in the last episode that where I kind of spilled the beans and told everybody that yes. Thriller author Steve Alton, author of Meg, The Lock, Phobos, so many other incredible books. Yes, he is going to be an upcoming guest. That episode has already been recorded. We had a wonderful time chatting, and he was so gracious. I'm blown away getting a chance to talk to him, and yeah, that episode is coming up. And thank you for everybody's excitement. You're experiencing the same thing I am. I can't wait to share it. I don't have an exact date yet for when that's coming up. It will be very soon, but I can't say with any certainty that it's going to be the next episode or, 2 down the road or something like that. But, rest assured, if you're following me on social media, specifically if you're subscribed to the show, then you won't miss out when that does drop. But rest assured, it will be soon. I can't wait to share it with you. It was a lot of fun, and you don't want to miss it. Well, speaking of fun, our guest author this week, Kathrin Hutson, she has written a number of best-selling dystopian, sci-fi, and dark fantasy books, including her international bestseller, Sleepwater Beat. We talked tainted heroes, writing and family, growing as an indie author. And I tell you what, I challenge you not to, at the very least, crack a smile whenever she starts to laugh, because she has one of those infectious laughs that just gets inside and shakes you up and makes you smile. You can't help it. You can't help it. I'm challenging you, but I already know you can't help it. You're gonna laugh. You're gonna smile. It's so much fun. You're gonna really enjoy this. But first, before we get over to that, just one more thing. I do want to thank our longtime sponsor, U-Sto-All, for having been they've been sponsoring the show from the very beginning. If you are in Missouri, in the Warrensburg area, and you are seeking self-storage because you're in the middle of a move, maybe you've got you've run out of space, maybe the garage is full, and your significant other is saying, hey, I want the car in the garage this winter. Whatever your excuses are, if you find yourself needing self-storage, check them out at U-Tor-All.net. It is the letter U-S-T-O-R-A-L-L.net. And you're going to see, they've got 2 facilities, climate control and non-climate control, both of them fully fenced in, both of them absolutely covered in cameras. They've got all the angles, everything's being watched, and these are digital cameras. They can zoom in and see how many hairs are on your nose. Not to get gross or anything, but they've been a leader in green energy in the area with solar power panels up on the roof, helping decrease the needs of energy for their facilities. The whole place is cleaned constantly. It's really, really a nice place. So make sure, like I said, check them out online at U-Tor-All.net so you can find what they have to offer. I also want to thank my buddies over at popgoestheculture.com. Tons of great podcasts, blogs, so many fun things over there. Just more for me to even talk about. So just take me at my word when I say click the link in the show notes for popgoestheculture.com and you will find yourself immersed in a pop culture wonderland. It's a lot of fun. I'm just about to get you over to our interview with Kathrin Hutson, but first, a word from our other sponsor, Scrivener. Jason here. Hey, I wanted to take a moment and tell you about my favorite writing tool, Scrivener. Now, I know you've heard about Scrivener because their writing software has been embraced by hundreds of thousands of other writers like you and I, from the novice to best-selling novelists. The reason we all use it is because of Scrivener's core concept to bring all the writing tools you use together in a single application. And with tools like automatic backup, character maps, project goals, and let's not forget that amazing corkboard, you can see why I use Scrivener every day. As a bonus for Sample Chapter Podcast listeners, use code CHAPTER for 20% off your desktop version. Scrivener writing software, built by writers for writers. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Sample Chapter Podcast. My guest today, oh my goodness, is somebody I'm very excited about. She has been writing fantasy and sci-fi since 2000. She can't get enough of tainted heroes, excruciating circumstances, impossible decisions, and happily never after. I'm talking about Kathrin Hutson, here with us today in the studio. Kathrin, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jason. Thank you.
I'm so happy to have you here, and we've been kind of bouncing back and forth, making a good time, and I'm glad we finally got this nailed down.
Yeah, me too. I am excited. This is great to be here.
It's my pleasure. Well, so, aside from what I was just talking about with you've been writing since 2000, give us a little bit about yourself that the audience might not know.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Let's see. I live in Vermont, way up here in the New England side of the U.S. I'm married, have a 2-year-old daughter, and 2 giant dogs. And kind of drawing a blank with more things at this point. That's pretty much my life at this point, writing and my family. I'm gonna go with that.
That's all right. That's all right. And I love the dogs' names, so that's really awesome.
Yeah, Sadie and Bruce Willis, that is. And another awesome, cool name factoid on there. My daughter's middle name is Skywalker.
Oh my gosh.
For real, on her birth certificate and everything. So.
Oh my gosh.
We like naming beings. I was gonna say things, but that doesn't work.
Oh my goodness, that's awesome. So you've been writing. Has it been professional writing since 2000, or has it been kind of like the dream and working some other kind of aspect?
Yeah, well, I would have been way too young to work professionally in 2000. So I started writing when I was 10. So I'll date myself or undate myself. I don't know. That's when I started writing. And from the minute I started, I fell in love with it and knew that it was always what I wanted to do. I majored in creative writing fiction at the University of Colorado Boulder. So that was my, whole career trajectory, so to speak. And I started my indie publishing career in 2015. Published my first book, Daughter of the Draken, and that is a dark fantasy. The Jungle Book meets Kill Bill with dragons. So it was very cool, and still very cool. And then I started ghostwriting actually professionally last year. So I have been published, and I have been running my own publishing industry for the last 4 years. And for the last year now at this point, I have been writing full time. Normal 50-60 hour work week of writing fiction. That's all I do, and absolutely love it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I was looking this over. I mean, this last year, 2018, I mean, you were quite prolific, it appears, with the Unclaimed series, and your most recent, the Blue Helix book 1 came out as well. I mean, you've been really busy.
I have been, and I can say I'm not publishing anything this year. I think maybe if I can get something out by the end of the year, I will. But last year was a good year for writing my fiction, and for getting out some great new books. And I hope to have something out this year. If not, next year will definitely bring some great things. But I have been writing. I'll tell you that. I write all the time, just a little bit less on my own work these days, but it's still getting attention. I am working on a new LGBT dark fantasy series in the same universe as the Unclaimed, actually, because I really enjoyed those characters in the world and the ideas, and I'm taking it down a darker path this time with the Vessel Broken series.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, tell us about what started it all with your book 1 of, and I didn't ask it ahead of time, book 1 of Genona's?
Genona. That's a hard G,
Daughter of Draken.
There you go. We'll go with that.
There we go.
Oh yeah. No, it did start with Daughter of the Draken. That was my first book that I wrote, first book that I published. I actually wrote Daughter of the Draken and Mother of the Draken, the other book in the duology. It's just the two of them. I wrote this in high school, actually. And they used to be one book, and it was a gigantic, horrific, 220,000 word thing. And I sat on it actually for 9 years, went through, growing up and life and learning how to be an adult and handle responsibilities or not handle them, and also write at the same time or not. And then finally, it was right after I got married, 2014, I decided I wanted to go back through and really buckle down and start querying traditional publishing agents, actually. And I went through the first book, Daughter of the Draken, and cut about 11,000 words from just that part alone after I split the giant monstrosity in half. And I racked up 116 rejection letters from traditional agents for this book, and I didn't have anyone else that I was aware of to query to send submission in. So I said, okay, I'm going to go the indie author route. I'm going to do this myself. This story just needs to be out in the world. And I put that out in October of 2015, and then May of 2016, I published Mother of the Draken, the sequel. And the month after I published Mother of the Draken, Daughter of the Draken, the first book, became an Amazon dark fantasy bestseller, which was super exciting, especially because I really had absolutely no idea what I was doing as an indie author in the beginning, which I am not ashamed to admit. It was a learning process for sure. And that's how we grow, right? Making mistakes and moving on. But that was very cool to me and pretty validating for me that, small fry indie author just starting out could make a bestsellers list just a year after, and if it had been rejected by a bunch of traditional agents. So that started me on the process, and didn't write at all while I was pregnant and shortly after I had my daughter. But then after that, that was the beginning of 2018 last year, I kind of kicked my butt into gear and said, okay, we're going to do this thing for real, make it serious, make a schedule, start writing all the time. And then it just kind of exploded into, I got exactly what I asked for, right? Writing all the time.
Oh my goodness, I would say so. Well, and that going back to the Mother Draken, I mean that's pretty cool. That's a good thing I've seen happen a couple of times where book 2 or book 3 of a series comes out and suddenly book 1 gains all this extra attention because everybody was like, oh, well, let me go back and check out the beginning because I don't want to see the newest. I want to see how it began. And next thing you know, you got a bestseller on your hands, which obviously worked really, really well for you. I mean, that's really great.
Yeah, thank you. It was very surprising and encouraging in a lot of ways too. So yeah, it was definitely cool for sure.
Well, it had to have been a good book because, I mean, people, you got a lot of reviews. It looks like it did really well. And I mean, you got to first write a good book for people to enjoy. And then next thing you know, you're going to have that bestseller status. So that's really cool. It must have been well deserved.
Oh, well, thank you. I like to think so. It's I just actually recently, Daughter of the Draken got nominated for an Effie in the 2019 Epic Fantasy Fanatics Readers' Choice Awards. That's enough.
Yay!
Yay! So they're still reading and going through the reading and the judging process, but it was super cool to get that nomination for that book too. Like 4 years after it was published. Like to keep the old ones alive, show them some love.
And that's a really cool thing to something you could share with like other authors that are still struggling with their first book or second book, or maybe they're still trying to get that first one done. It's not over just because the book's out there and maybe it hadn't hit yet. Do you think it was the book 2 garnered the interest, or how did you keep that interest in that first one?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I think if I had the tools back then 4 years ago when I published Daughter of the Draken that I have now at my disposal in terms of, just general knowledge of how to launch a book in the first place, or, who to network with, marketing and promoting and, like authentically, genuinely reaching out and connecting with readers or people like who super geek out over dark fantasy or any kind of speculative fiction like I do, my favorite authors and what have you. If I had known all those things 4 years ago, I mean, Daughter of the Draken may have even gotten a lot bigger, right? And honestly, my first response is to say I just got lucky. I know that that's not true. I know, there's a line between humility and lying, but I I think what I did was I did a little bit of networking, and I did reach out to other authors, and I did, try and work on some cross promotion and doing interviews of other authors and going from blog to blog and helping other people who were just starting out, like with their first or second book, kind of build our audiences that way. And I played around with different like promotion websites, sending out emails to their readers and subscribers and putting ads out there. And it was very, very small scale. I don't know, it must have been the right amount of pushing at the right time when people were really into what was happening, and that's really all I can say. That, the biggest truth behind it is that it's just a matter of keep going, keep doing it. It is not over when you publish the book, and then that's it, right? Like
and you really you stepped outside your comfort zone. A lot of authors will, well, I wrote the book and I put it out there, so come find it. But you kept reaching out to other authors. Hey, I'd like to talk about my book, and let me help you. We'll talk about your book too. And I mean, that was the whole thing. Is like you said, you just didn't give up. You just kept going, and obviously, you kept writing as well. and that always helps because your last book is only as good as your next one, and if you keep writing and putting the books out there, well, then you're gonna get seen, and clearly it's working really well for you.
Yeah, thank you. I think it is. It's with a few bumps here and there, a little bit of dips, it's definitely still heading upward and onward, which I am so grateful for because I absolutely love being an author and I love writing what I write, and it's it's paying off. So it's nice to have the best of both worlds.
Now, have you always been like really into the dystopian, sci-fi, dark fantasy kind of thing?
Yes, I always have. I started reading Stephen King when I was 10, so that has had a huge influence on that love of dark fiction in general, but mostly dark fantasy. His Dark Tower series is my all-time favorite. I'm actually reading it again for the 10th time currently in all the spare time I have right now. But I absolutely love those books, and they're brilliant and they are super dark and amazing. And so that hugely influenced me. I've never really been a fan of light reading. So I've always been really into it. And it was for a while just, epic fantasy or lighter fantasy. And I started to find as a reader anyway, that all the lighter epic or medieval fantasy books started to sound the same to me when I read them. And then when I found like the wider pool of dark fantasy and dark fiction, and dystopian sci-fi that wasn't young adult either, like William Gibson's Pattern Recognition is actually one of my favorite books, and I know it's not technically dystopian, kind of. I mean, it's way off in the future, and it may be considered dystopian, but that really influenced a lot of things too for me. So I've got a wide range of books I enjoy across the board. But yeah, I've always had that interest there.
That's awesome. Well, and so then you moved into your first, well, not your first series, but a 3-part series at least here with the Unclaimed series. Book 1, Sanctuary of, is it Dalen?
Dellen.
All right. Well, tell us about this because these look amazing.
Oh, why, thank you very much. And it's actually surprises people when I say, the covers all have a woman on them. The main character is a man, and whose name is not Dellen. But this trilogy, The Unclaimed, is actually lighter, so to speak, than any of my other books. I know I just went to say light epic fantasy isn't really my thing, but it has a lot of darkness in it too, and there is no happily ever after, and there is no the hero comes to save the day and kill the big bad guy. And there's a prophecy in there. I turned it on its head because I like to do that to tropes. This is basically following Karen, who is an institutionalized man newly released from basically indentured servitude as a blacksmith. He has no idea where he is in the world or who he is or where or who anyone else or anywhere else is. And the one person that he thought he could trust is the one person who freed him. And he gets sucked into this world of, prophecies and secrets and betrayals and everyone planning around him for his destiny. And he's got no idea what's going on. So I took this character, Karen, through 3 books of kind of bashing him over the head repeatedly. He dies 48 times. If that doesn't get somebody interested, I don't know what will. And during this whole process, he comes to have this, on one hand, a very caregiving, nurturing, almost sibling-like relationship with, I call her the woman child, Dellen, So, the tagline for the book says, "One woman with the mind of a child and the world's ancient secrets are trapped within her." I believe that's how it goes, or, could be off by a few words. But so when he first meets Dellen, she looks like a grown woman, but she thinks and speaks and acts like a child, and he becomes her caretaker, and the only person who really is interested in her well-being instead of what they can get from her, because she also then becomes this ancient, omniscient, all-knowing, incredibly powerful, terrifying being who reveals herself only to Karen, because he has been sort of selflessly caring for her in a non-romantic way. So there does become a bit of a romance through this book, but it's just all about playing with dualities, like mortals and immortals, and platonic relationships versus romance versus compulsion and love, right? And Karen's just trying to find his way through it. There was the long version of that trilogy.
Setting up a few other tropes there just to turn them on their heads, it sounds like.
Exactly. I love to destroy.
Oh my gosh, that sounds amazing.
Thanks.
And those came out boom, 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 3 in a row last year. And you didn't miss a beat, so to speak, jumping right into Sleepwater Beat. Most recent. I know. I've been doing this for a little while now. I'm getting better at it.
Well done.
With Sleepwater Beat, your most recent, which is now an international bestseller, award-winning sci-fi finalist in the Book Awards. Oh my gosh!
Yeah. Thanks. I like that. Excited.
Well, yeah. Tell us about Sleepwater Beat, because I know this is the book we're going to hear from today, but what are we looking at with this? What can we expect from someone who picks up this book?
So first thing I want to say to expect is that this is not a happy book. So if somebody's looking for, happy anything, you probably won't like what I write. I had someone leave a 2-star review on Amazon and say that they only read a third of the book and were leaving 2 stars because it just wasn't happy enough. And I got so excited. I was really yes, I don't care about the 2 stars. It wasn't happy enough. This is perfect. I did exactly what I wanted. So Sleepwater Beat is the girl with the dragon tattoo meets X-Men.
Oh.
In the very near future, and instead of superpowers physical X-Men superpowers, there are certain people throughout the world who have, through various means, developed the ability to elicit physical responses in people who hear them speak with a certain type of word, speak a certain way, and that is what the beat is. Spinning a beat is using their superpowers of speech, so to speak. And Leo, the main character, can make anyone who hears her beat believe absolutely anything that she says, no matter how far-fetched or crazy or complete crap it is. She can make them believe her. So this is, in a very near future world of things that could potentially happen with the pharmaceutical and information technology companies becoming huge, giant conglomerates that kind of spread across the, controlling everything, so to speak. And there's government conspiracies and human experimentation and lots of gunfights and fistfights and explosions and cussing and cigarettes. And it's super action-packed and also goes down some pretty dark avenues. It was actually an attempt originally at some social commentary on my part, and I struggled a lot with it in some ways because I was so certain that I was just slipping these little ideas and comments of my own into this so subtly until I published it. Terrified that I just blatantly said these things and no one's gonna find it entertaining at all. I don't want to, not using it as a platform. That's not what I wanted to do, but actually it seems to have turned out just fine. And I've written more of myself as a person and more experiences in my own life into Leo Tiefler, main character of Sleepwater Beat, and this book overall than I have in any of my other books. And this one is just about finding a place to belong, feeling weird and having all the circumstances of one's life and being special in a way, so to speak, kind of dictate the way that Leo functions in different groups of people in society, and whether or not she can trust people because they like her for who she is, or if they're just trying to use her for what she can do. And I'm super excited to keep writing this series. There will be at least more books, and who knows where it's going to go from here. But this book is the close to home book for me, at least now. When I wrote Daughter of the Draken, that was my close to home book, and it was my first. So there's a bit of a difference that way. Yeah.
Did you plan this out at all, or was it just kind of you had it in your head and you just started running with it?
It was actually it started as a short story. It was like a failed experiment on my part. I wanted to write a short story that was in this kind of set up timeline wise, like the movie Memento. I don't know if you've seen that.
Mm-hmm.
Have you?
Yeah.
So that movie shows clues about his past and what he's done and where he's going by moving backwards, right? So with this short story that Sleepwater Beat originated as, I decided that I did not want any two scenes to be chronologically next to each other at all, whether that was forward or backward in time. So I just cut the scenes into little strips of paper and shuffled them around and stuck them together in a short story. And it was 30 pages long, and it was cool and entertaining. I took it to my writers group at the time, the Charleston Writers Group, when we lived in South Carolina, and they were like, yeah, okay, the writing's awesome, that's great, but there's so much more here. What are you doing with it? And they asked me all these questions about, the world and what's happening with this and this and such. And I did not mean to make it a novel in the beginning, but they convinced me to do it. Their excitement convinced me to do it, and then it just turned into this thing, which is the best. I feel like that's the best way for a book to be born, is to just
I mean, you took those 30 pages, those original 30 pages, and turned it into 400. I mean, this is I think they were right. There was clearly something here, and I mean, it's gone on to be an international bestseller. I mean, wow, that was some good advice.
It certainly was. I do believe this writers group in the acknowledgement. I owe them. Yeah, they're in there. I owe them a lot for giving me the motivation and the inspiration in a lot of ways for it is. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, my inspiration I got from my writers group was after I had read a few chapters, I was into chapter 4, and then somebody went, "Oh, now I understand what's going on. You should start it here."
Oh.
I was like, "Oh, okay," but they were right.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, yeah, all right, so.
Yeah, well, okay, scrap this. Yeah, there are plenty of things from the original short story Sleepwater Beat that no longer exist. We gotta be willing to throw stuff away sometimes.
Exactly. Yes. Have a thick skin, be willing to hear the critique, and I've come to welcome it. I'm just like, lay it on me.
Please, I want it to be the best.
Yeah, nobody's gonna be as tough on me as my wife is. So it's like, just come on.
Usually people say as tough as myself, but
Oh no.
Your wife?
My wife is my first and biggest critic, and I will show her something, and I'm just like, this is awesome. Look at how well I did, and she's going, this is like some silly prince from a Disney movie. What did you do here? And I'm just kind of looking at her like, wait, what? And she's always right. She sees it from that different point of view, and I'll come back and like, okay, now that I've calmed down, I can see what she's talking about.
Yeah, right. Just let that not sting so bad. That's nice though. You have that. Like, you have a built-in beta reader. Like, that's nice. My husband doesn't read my books. He doesn't read fiction. It's not that he refuses to read mine specifically. He just doesn't read fiction, which is totally fine. But he is always the first person when we meet new people to talk about what I do. Everybody else. That's a fair trade, I think.
That's good. Good to have some support at home.
For sure. Super important.
This has been so much fun, and I mean, I've loved talking to you before the show, and you know, just hearing your laugh and hearing the history with all of these books. I mean, I can't wait to pick up a few of them for myself, and of course, I'm hearing my Missouri accent now, and as we were talking, so. Kathrin, thank you so much. Where can people find and follow you online?
Yes, people can find me. Well, there's my website, KathrinHutsonFiction.com, and my books are across the board wherever good books are sold: Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, Apple, all those places. I'm on Facebook as well, Kathrin Hutson Fiction, Instagram, Kathrin Hutson Fiction, Twitter, Exquisitely Dark. Those are all my places. So you hit any of those up and I will be there.
Perfect. Yes. And everybody listening, of course, you know how it works. There will be links for all of this in the show notes, as well as a link to go and pick up a copy of the book yourself. Make sure you click those links. You got to check it out. These are amazing. So once again, thank you so much, Kathrin. This has been a real treat. It's been a lot of fun for me.
Oh, I have enjoyed it so much too. Thank you for having me, Jason. Thank you for laughing at my jokes.
That's my pleasure. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you know what that means. I'm going to step aside and hand the floor over to my guest, Kathrin Hutson, with Sleepwater Beat.
All right, this is chapter 16, Sleepwater Beat. They sat on the couch, spears in hand, and let the silence fight for them. Carl had picked her up from the police station only an hour before, and though he hadn't said a word, she knew he was annoyed with her. He rarely spoke anyways, but he hadn't met her eyes once, nor could she find the hint of smile under his mustache that she had learned to track. Leah winced as she lit a cigarette, the knuckles on both her hands already bruising and swollen. The cops hadn't asked her too many questions, hadn't really cared that a scrappy girl managed to rough up a guy who apparently was drunk in public more than he was anything else. She'd been in a holding cell for 8 hours, and then she'd been let out to meet Carl in his anemic car. It had been an abnormally difficult 8 hours. Not only did it piss her off that she could have avoided the whole thing altogether if she just used her words, but she also hated the fact that Carl felt he could tell her what to do as she was carted away to county. She'd only gotten 2 hours of sleep and spent the rest of the time wondering why the fuck she made so much money using her words only to be ordered not to, especially at a time when she would have been far more helpful than not. I was doing my job, Leo said, looking at the man beside her and hoping he'd acknowledge her presence somehow. Carl grunted. And I didn't say a thing to the cops. Carl only chugged his beer and lit another cigarette. They started early at just before noon, but Leah wasn't going to complain. She just wanted an explanation for the silence and what so obviously felt like blame. When another few minutes passed, she realized she had either fucked something up really bad or Carl was in another world altogether. What the fuck did I do wrong? She asked. He leaned over and held the beer bottle between his legs. Nothing, Leo, he sighed. She could hear his heavy swallow when he looked up at the ceiling. You didn't do anything wrong. I know you didn't talk to the cops, didn't use your words. It's just... He stopped to run a hand through his hair, his head hanging almost between his own knees. Leo thought he looked really fucking tired. This happened in front of the Purple Lion. We just have to be careful about our connections with people and how they're made. With Louise? She asked. Carl leaned back to give her a short-lived but pointed glance out of the corner of his eye. Why? A loud knock rapped on the door. Leo stared at Carl, hoping he'd give in and tell her something, but whoever their visitor was had already distracted him too much. He still didn't return her gaze when he stood from the couch. She didn't find any recognition on his face when he answered the door. As soon as it opened, a giant chest barreled Carl out of the way, followed by the gaudy velvet and overindulgently slick hair of Louise. The Lord of the Beat retained his usual flippant composure, but he wore a scent Leo thought smelled like fear. His eyes burned as he caught sight of her, but that was his only giveaway. "Had a lovely visit with the city police, did you?" His voice was as silky as his clothing, though it failed to conceal as much. His companion, a giant of a man, wore a shiny silver vest over a dark blue Oxford shirt, the buttons of which strained to hold in his chest and giant belly beneath. He seized a metal folding chair, jamming it upon the floor in front of Leo, and Carl was left to close the door behind them. Louise approached the chair, swiping at the seat with a manicured hand before setting himself upon it like a dainty housewife. Leo glanced at Carl, who leaned against the rim of the sink, arms folded across his chest. Then she noticed the knife there, at his elbow, just in case. He didn't say a thing. She took another drag of her cigarette and met Louise's gaze again. "Something makes me think you might enjoy their friendship more than mine." Louise plucked an invisible hair from his shoulder, sprinkling it to the side. She didn't respond. Louise tucked his already plastered hair behind his ear and met her gaze with purpose. "Tell me," he spoke through his teeth. "Tell me that you and I are still friends." She took another drag, letting the smoke out toward their visitors. She'd catered to the man at his club when she worked for him, but she was off the clock, and this is where she fucking lived. For now. "I tell stories, Louise," she said, and the sound of her voice instantly triggered the fog in his eyes. "But I don't talk to cops. And I did my job. You and I are square." A lopsided smile split his tidied face, and he nodded. Then he took a deep breath, smoothed his oil hair again. "Yes," he sniffed. "You and I are right with one another." His bodyguard shook his head, her short beat having affected him as well. Louise turned very slightly in his chair. "But Carl and I are not." Carl's eyes widened only a little, and he raised his head. Nothing else. "Carl and I have unfinished business, left unattended for quite some time. I believe you, Leo." His eyes did not leave Carl's face as he addressed her. "Your mentor, however, must also clean up the mess you've made. How many drinks have you had today, Carl?" Carl only nodded at the half-empty beer bottle beside the couch, his jaw flexing in defiance. "Not enough to keep you quiet this afternoon." Louise crossed his legs. "Let's hear it from you, too." Carl uncrossed his arms and stood straight. "Hold on now." He glanced at Leo, discomfort and guilt flashing in his dark eyes. "You know the reason I don't." "I know the reason," Louise said, "but your girl here has put me in quite an uncomfortable position. Dog's on my trail and all. You owe me, Carl. Spin a beat for me now, for the sake of Leo's loyalty, and I will continue to pay you. Let you work for me. Refuse me, and I will turn you both in. How long have you been running, exactly?" Carl swallowed, his beard bristling as his jaw worked in anger and forced composure. He glanced at Leo again, who could only frown at him. She couldn't do a thing, had absolutely no idea what Louise was talking about. Leo hadn't done anything wrong, except for maybe taking her job a bit too seriously the night before. Sometimes she snapped like that. Rarely, but it still happened. But that had nothing to do with Carl, and she'd already been turned in and released. So what the fuck were they talking about? She stared back and forth from one man to the other in the next few moments of silence. "I got the call from Melissa earlier this afternoon," Carl began, glaring into Louise's face as his words took hold. Leo had never felt anything like it. The warm sensation blooming in her stomach, spreading through her shoulders and arms, tingling in her feet. Sighing, her head drifting backwards, she sank into the couch. She heard the lilt of Carl's voice, his short pauses, but could not place the words. All the world had become a warm fog, melting her, and she was vaguely aware of the beer in her hand tipping out of her grasp. The lived-in garage faded away, and all that existed was Carl's humming voice and the magic in her veins. When he finished, there were a few long minutes of silence before the light returned to Leo's eyes, and she sighed. The fog lifted, the warmth faded, and she felt it leave with a sweet longing. She opened her eyes to find Louise smoothing his oiled hair back onto his head, wiping a single bead of sweat from his brow. "Oh, yes," His voice was a sigh, and he straightened his jacket. His eyes were still hazy when he opened them, but his toothy smile was sweeter than usual. Carl, I have so missed your words. It's a pity you're so adamant about keeping them to yourself. He leaned his head back, breathing deeply through his nose and shaking his little curls. Carl leaned against the sink again, knuckles white at his sides. His nostrils flared as he stared at the back wall, never looking at Louise or at Leo. The bodyguard by the back door snorted, shook his head, and a thin, dopey smile spread across his dull lips. Leo, she swallowed at Louise's voice, your friend has won you back my trust. You owe him for what he's just done. He stood, again brushing the imaginary dust from his sleeves, and nodded at his companion. The giant man swung the door wide and waited for Louise to skirt through it. He called over his shoulder, I'll see you too soon. Carl's home felt quieter than usual, despite the hum of the mini-fridge. Leo remembered her beer and righted it. Half of it had drained away, leaving a sweet stain on the cushion beside her. I had no idea that you... Carl's eyes caught hers in a flash of anger and pain, cutting her off with their knife-like intensity. His lower lip trembled, and for a moment she thought he was going to tell her everything. Instead, he shouldered his way through the door, pulled it firmly shut behind him, and left her alone in the yeasty smell of beer.
And you've been listening to Kathrin Hutson, reading a sample chapter from her international best-selling book, Sleepwater Beat. This is book 1 of the Blue Helix series, so make sure you are clicking the links in the show notes for more about this book, to pick up this book itself, to follow Kathrin and all of her social media. Don't forget to also click those links in the show notes for our sponsors and friends of the show. And as I've said many times before, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out next week when I come back with a new author, a new book, and a new sample chapter. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We will see you again real soon.